Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're happy to present today's webinar, Summer Organization, Managing Your To-Do List with Charley Howard, BloomNet's Director of Products and Services. My name is Renato Sogecco, Business Educator at the Flores Institute, and I'll be introducing Charley Howard and moderating today's session. We know that your time is valuable, so we are scheduled to go for 20 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes for Q&A. Charley brings a wealth of experience of running a successful floral business. So before we begin in earnest, I'd like to ask Charley to share more about himself and his experience.
Thank you, Renato. I've been a florist here in Jacksonville for 25 years with Kuhn Flowers. I'm an accountant by trade. I'm a computer guy by default because no one else wanted the job. And my main focus is basically on the financial aspects of running a florist. And I've purchased several florists over the years.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that introduction. Before we begin, just another housekeeping note. If you have any questions throughout the broadcast, please type them in the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll monitor the questions throughout. If any questions pop up during the session, we'll go ahead and answer them quickly. But otherwise, if we need to proceed, we'll let Charley finish his presentation, and we'll have that 10-minute Q&A session at the end. So with that, Charley, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Before we get going on today's overview of how to get organized and so forth, I want to give you a little treat in that we've got a program called Florist Guide to Profitability. And it's going to be an 8-section guide, and we're going to try to do a webinar of about an hour for each of those topics. The sales being the most important one will probably have to be split into two because we have the sales and then we have the marketing piece. All the others, cost of goods, labor and payroll, operating expenses, wire service, income and expense, technology, which I probably will get some help on, accounting, which is my strong point, which will also have accounts payable and accounts receivable, and then the last piece is human resources. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into managing that to-do list, and let's focus in first on sales. Normally, we're very slow during the summer. We had a busy Mother's Day and graduations, so we've got to consider how can we get more sales into that shop. Well, the first one that I've always been very successful is that we've always had a buy one, get one free rose arrangement special. And what that's done for us is, first of all, roses are probably the cheapest you can get during the summer months because demand is low. So when you go ahead and give one away, yeah, it hurts the margin a little bit, but you might be able to pick up a delivery fee because normally they'll buy a dozen for their mom and then they'll give one for their wife. So they're usually not in the same place, so that's how you get your 2 deliveries or delivery charges. Next thing is that I know the salespeople are just waiting for that phone to ring or waiting for people to walk through the door. Well, while they're waiting, why don't they start prospecting new customers? There's always churches, funeral homes, hospitals, and their gift shops, and corporate business. If you put a mandate in there that you'd like them to make at least 5 calls a day, you should be able to pick up another 1 or 2 customers a week, and that'll help you build your business. The third thing is don't forget your existing customers. They're the people that have gotten where you are now, and why not go back to the well and see if you can get them to buy more. Even if you just call them up, thank them, and let them know that you've got a summer special or you're got something else in mind, and that'll help a lot. So that helps with the sales thing, but one of the areas that we tend to lack a little bit on is doing some planning. And because we live for the 3 major holidays, that being December, Valentine's, and Mother's Day, those holidays seem to be running right together. So as soon as you get into that holiday season, there's not a lot of time for any planning. It's basically reacting to what challenges we have that have come up. So if you can start planning your holidays now, it'll pay off for you in the future. So what are we talking about when we're talking about planning? Well, the first thing is that recap what you did last year. What products did you offer? What were the price points? Which ones sold? Which ones didn't sell? And what you need to do to make that holiday successful. And remember, if you're one of those shops that brings in a lot of giftware for the December one, NABCO, as an example, that's right here in Jacksonville and so forth, is starting to ship their Christmas inventory now to the shops. And now is a good time to go ahead and when you get your Christmas inventory, take a look at it, make sure that's exactly what you ordered and you got everything that you did order, and report any damage as soon as it comes in, because as it gets later in the year, it's going to be tougher and tougher to try to replace some of those items that you brought in for the holiday. Another thing is to review your product line. For some of you that actually have products that you actually sell rather than just filling orders and things, you can take a look at those arrangements and say, geez, you know, we need to tweak them a little bit. They're looking a little old. They're looking a little stale. Look at the cost and so forth and take a look and see if you can increase your prices. A lot of times, you know, we just keep the same price all the time and then we wonder why at the end of the year we're not making as much money and so forth. I know we're trying to hold on to the business that we have, and we're always a little reluctant to go ahead and do a price increase, but, you know, it doesn't have to be $10. Why don't you settle for just $5? But those $5 will add up at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the year. Container inventory. If you're like most florists, somehow or another, that inventory just seems to be growing and growing and growing. And what ends up happening is you have a lot of onesie, twosies, threesies, and so forth. So if you go ahead and put them in one area, you can use those to fill a lot of those orders that are quote, quote, designer choices. The other thing that we can do with them, if they're kind of more on the giftware side and so forth, go ahead and put them on a table and put them right in front of the front door. Market clearance, market 50% off, even though you didn't really mark them off 50%. You'll see how fast they go because people will think they're getting a deal, which they are. The last thing is that on the merchandising, it's a good idea to go ahead and try to clean up your shop, do the dusting, the cleaning that you need, remove anything that doesn't look right and so forth. Make it look fresh. Make it look like you really care and that you're still in business. The last piece is basically payroll and labor cost. And depending on the size of your shop will depend on how much latitude you really have to be able to scale back or do some changes. For instance, you've got to have someone at sales the whole time at the counter probably. So it's kind of hard to go ahead and cut that person's hours too much. Otherwise, you're filling in as the owner or the manager. But part of it is that you can take a look at your business, and in some cases you can actually invoke what is called summer hours. And that might be that normally you are open on Saturday until 2 o'clock. Well, maybe at this particular point in time you can say, look, we're going to close at noontime because after noon it's so hot here, we don't get a lot of business, no people are really traveling, so go ahead and bring the Saturday hours down to 12 o'clock. I know that in some cases that might affect your delivery thing, but you could at least close off the store and let your delivery people go ahead and make their delivery by their 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock cutoffs so that you have those 800 orders still coming into you. The other thing is training and cross-training of your personnel. During the holidays and so forth, I was always reluctant not to release anyone that wasn't performing unless they were just out and out destructive. And I always waited until after the holiday before I made any choices as far as who should stay and who should go and who's a keeper and who isn't, who's trainable and who isn't trainable. For those that you can keep and you think there's some potential there, put some extra training in. On the sales side, teach them how to do add-ons. It's easy when, you know, you're at McDonald's, the first thing out of that guy's mouth is, you want fries with that order? In our particular case, hey, can we add a balloon? Can we add some chocolates? How about a plush? The other thing that we did at our flower shop is that there were certain times where you could add additional roses. So you could add 3 roses to any arrangement for $10. Make it special, make it a little bit better. There's an extra $10 that's going to your top line. On the drivers, because you're not getting as much volume and so forth, some people have gone over to contract drivers. So for those of you that don't know what a contract driver is, it's basically a driver that comes in, he's using his own vehicle, you're paying him X amount of dollars per delivery, and he goes ahead and makes the delivery and he's only paid on deliveries. Versus someone that you have to have on the payroll, you're paying him on an hourly basis, and if he only makes 2 deliveries, then that's all he's got. Where the contract driver, you're paying him $5 a delivery or $8 a delivery. You know what your cost is, and you know that you're charging $10 for the delivery. You know at least for every delivery that's going out, you're making a couple bucks on. It doesn't work for all of us because we have bigger zones to carry or cover. But the bottom line is that it's always a resource that you can use. I know most of us try to use them during the holidays and so forth, but during the summer, that might be a way to help augment what you need. The last thing is that on payroll, there are 2 areas that you can try to set some goals for. Number 1 is the designers. And you say, well, how can you set a goal for a designer? Well, there's basically one way, and that is that a designer should be able to produce X amount of arrangements during a particular hour. So as an example, if you took your average sale at your shop is $60, and you figure that a designer could make 4 of those arrangements in an hour, that means that he can produce, or she can produce, $240 an hour in arrangement sales. All right. So if he's going to be working 6 hours, 6 hours times 240 comes up to be almost $1,500 a day that designer would be producing for you. All right. And again, that's just a benchmark. But you say, well, okay, fine. What about if it's a funeral piece? Well, if the funeral piece is $240, then he should be able to produce, or she should be able to produce that arrangement in 1 hour. And again, it's just a guideline. Delivery, the same thing. You want to set a goal for those delivery guys when they're going out to basically be able to deliver X amount of deliveries per hour, so forth. Depending, again, on your zone and how big your delivery area is and so forth, you could probably hope for 3. 4 is very, very good, and 5 is you've knocked it out of the park. I know it's fairly quick and gone through, but basically at this particular point in time, I'd really like to get some input from you members and so forth to let me know if you've got any questions or there are other topics that you would like to know about or anything that we can help you, because we are here to educate and we want to be a help to you to make your business as successful as ours.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie, for the insightful information. I am checking the queue, and we do have a little extra time for a Q&A. And one of the questions that we do have in the queue is, what do you mean by planning? Can you give a quick overview of what a plan would include?
Basically, when we had a plan, we started with, first of all, what were we going to be offering? And we had our own arrangements that we called different things for different holidays. But the basic line is that we had a lineup of what we were going to be offering. And you can think of the holidays as you wanted to try to sell off of a selected menu, similar to when you went out on a restaurant for New Year's Eve. And New Year's Eve, they didn't have their full menu. They had an abbreviated menu. to go to the extreme, you had your choice. At one time, it was either going to be beef, chicken, or fish. I'm not saying that you limit your menu to just those items, but you've got to be fairly realistic in that you can only do so many good arrangements during that time, so try to limit that. So now that you know what your products are and so forth, you can then think, okay, fine, what am I going to be doing for advertising? Am I going to do anything on the radio? Am I going to do anything on TV? Am I going to do anything in print? What have we got for email blast? What have we got going on the web? When are we doing it? Who's doing it? When does it have to be done? Do we have any printed things? What are the deadlines? Do I have all of my containers that I need to get through the holiday? So forth. Then you take a look at, okay, fine, I think we're going to be doing the same amount of volume. How many people are you going to need? Who are you going to bring in? Are we going to have temps? Are we going to get the son-in-law? Are we going to get the sister-in-law? Are we going to get my daughter? I mean, what are we going to do to get through this holiday? So forth. All right. Do we have enough vans? Do we have to rent some more vans for delivery? Or are we going to use contract drivers and let them go ahead and put 15 arrangements in a Volkswagen and hope that all of the product doesn't get crushed? Those are all challenges, and that's all part of your plan. So when you think about that plan, just don't be afraid to put out the details as far as who's going to do what, when does it have to happen.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Another question, what is a recommended marketing budget?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Basically, advertising is going to be one of those controllable expenses. And when we get into your financials and so forth, we split your expenses into two areas. One is going to be fixed cost, and they are going to be, just like the title says, they're fixed. Whether you're doing $10,000 a month or you're doing $50,000 a month, those expenses never change, so they're fixed. Advertising and marketing is going to be one of those controllable expenses that you control when you're going to spend the money, how much you're going to spend, and what other items are you going to sacrifice to be able to put the money to marketing. And again, you have so many choices today, and depending on your market will depend on how much money you can afford to spend for marketing. As an example, in the old days here in Jacksonville, you could get a billboard for $1,000 a month, okay? So I could put that in as one of my marketing things that I wanted to have a couple billboards. And I know that, okay, I could have them. Today, unfortunately, the billboards here in Jacksonville are $5,000 a month, and you have to commit to a 12-month plan for that billboard. In the old days, we could get a month over here and a month over there or whatever. Now you have to commit to that billboard for an entire year. Well, if you go by that billboard and you keep seeing the same name, the same name, the same name, after a while you ignore that billboard and you don't even look at it. So how effective is that billboard? That's just one example of where you can put your marketing dollars. The other thing is TV. For us here in Jacksonville, TV's become very, very expensive. The other thing of it is, because I've been in the business 25 years, in the old days we only had 3 stations. Now I've got cable TV and I've got 350 stations. So which one do you put it on? It's very, very hard, very, very tough. Radio seems to be somewhat affordable, but again, we've got, I don't know, 50 stations here in Jacksonville that we could listen to, so it's very, very hard to go ahead and say, okay, this is where I'm going to put my money. One of the things that you can do with some of these advertising people, though, is you can do what we call a trade credit. A trade credit is you say, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and commit to $2,500 in your billing advertising, and I'm going to give you $2,500 of product from my store. Well, you and I both know that $2,500 of product from my store is really only going to cost me about 35% of that $2,500. So basically, when you're able to do trade credits, and not everyone will do them with you, but at least you're buying advertising with discounted dollars. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a really interesting comment about TV, because one of the other webinars that we've done is a webinar, a study of how millennials conduct their floral purchasing, and what modes of advertising are most effective with them. Ironically, a lot of people think that millennials are a strictly device-based demographic, but this study showed that TV was in fact the most effective medium in reaching out to millennials in terms of branding. So thank you for going over that.
I agree with the TV. The problem of it here in Jacksonville is that if you have the diehards that are looking at the 3 major network news shows, those news shows spots to put on TV are extremely expensive.
So we do have a follow-up question for the planning. How different is planning for the holidays as compared to normal planning?
The holidays, because of the increase in volume, and statistically, Valentine's is about 3 times your normal volume, and Mother's Day is going to be probably 2 to 2.5 times your volume, and December could also be right around that 2 to 2.5%. So with that increase in volume, it really stretches your staff an awful lot, and you normally have to bring in some extra bodies just to get through it, because there's only so many hours in the day that the normal staff can work. And yeah, we can push them to that, but basically we've always had to bring in additional help. So the holidays, just with volume and so forth, tend to stretch all of your resources a lot, whether it's the payroll side, or whether it's containers, or where am I going to store all this stuff. It just stretches it, and without any planning and so forth, it just makes it more difficult to get through those holidays.
Okay, perfect. We'll just stay on for a couple more minutes. If anyone has any last-minute questions, please go ahead and submit them in the questions box. We did have a question about this slide. In a day or so, or in a day, you'll be receiving a follow-up email from GoToMeeting, and it will allow you to submit questions to a survey to rate this webinar. But that page will also include a link to download these slides. So we'll just go ahead and wait around for about a minute. Let us know, again, if there's any last-minute questions, and we will answer them. Charley, any last thoughts that you have, in retrospect, looking back, that you wanted to fill in the audience?
I can't think of anything offhand other than you have my email address, so if you can't think of anything right now, please go ahead and email me. I'll be more than happy to share my experiences, my thoughts, what I've got going on, and see if I can help you. Okay.
With that, Charley, thank you very much for the presentation. Very insightful. And as Charley mentioned, if you do have questions that do pop up after we leave this webinar, please feel free to email him at choward@worldflowers.com. Thank you, everyone, for your participation in today's webinar. Have a great day.